So, what to say about work? If you want to know about this work, look at it and form your own reactions. And I hope my words don't get in the way of that. I'm going to tell a few stories about each of these walls. We are going to get up, and because it's directly behind you, and we're going to move quickly and quietly, and then we're going to stay still. So we'll invoke that chaos, but we're going to keep it compressed. So I'm going to sing a little thing to you that I heard my father, and there's at least one minister in our midst who has probably said these words also before sermons. But I'm going to do the version that came out on Jimmy Cliff's reggae album in the 70s. This was pre-Bob Marley. And for some reason, he had a song that had these words in it. May these words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, oh, far out. So now we're going to move over here, and we're going to keep the chaos tight. So come on in, come on in. In. The best bars are always crowded. So we've all heard speeches where too many thanks are given to all the donors and the muckety-mucks that need to be thanked. I am going to thank a few people in a very different way, profoundly from my heart. I have thanks to give to this wonderful staff. The staff showed up at my studio with the former director in a van. She said, oh, would you mind if Ann Brennan, probably a lot of you know her, would you mind if I brought a few of my colleagues? And a van with 8 people showed up. And we had a surprising conversation. As the director said, there were fragments of these pieces, not that one, the flag, but these other pieces kind of laying around because at least these two were unfinished. But there they were, and there was enough that provoked a conversation where laughter and tears occurred, which is a pretty rare thing with strangers in our living room. So secondly, I'd like to thank Rian Lord, who's right there, and who had a lot to do, and Tyson, who had less to do with this show, but 2 colleagues that work out of my studio. Without them, this wouldn't have happened, especially the Raredas piece. It is a pleasure and honor to work with you both. Thank you for what you've put into this. And they watched me struggling with this. So this wall, called Cross, started in around 2000, early 2000s. My wife, sorry, there's one other person. Thanks most of all. Needs to go to my lovely wife, Joan Ellen Deck, otherwise known as Jed, who's right there, who puts up with a lot and is a trusted smell tester who can say, yeah, this works pretty much, or maybe not. We've been together a long time. We've made a lot of art. She's seen a lot of art made, and she's part of it all, and thank you. So Jed and I grew up as a preacher's kid on the grounds of Washington Cathedral, as did my 2 sisters who were here. And didn't go to church for several decades. It's amazing how kids brings on this yearning for something that's bigger than us. And so we stuck our toe into St. Mark's Episcopal Church. And improbably soon after joined a study group studying during Lent. And we talked a lot about the crucifixion. And I knew about these stories, but now I'm an adult, and so what is it about that story? And when Palm Sunday came around, I woke up, Jed, with only one daughter at that point, was in New Jersey, and I felt moved to make something. As a way of trying to understand these stories that I was re-encountering. And so these 3 4x4 crosses were made, called the Lenten crosses, shot, burned, and sawn. This was the most violently made one with a unsharp chainsaw that jumps around, and it was pretty violent. I made these crosses because the story, it seemed to me, one of its meanings is that we are the crucifiers and the crucified. It's not just those bad guys over the railroad tracks that are doing the crucifying. It's all of us. We have violence in all of us. And that was, that was the way I came to terms, for me, about that story. Several years later, I felt, when I hung these crosses at St. Mark's, I felt this genuine and spontaneous support that these were meaningful to that congregation. And I felt, well, maybe I found a church that I can be myself in. I can make stuff, which is what I do. So a couple of years later, I hung 14 crosses after the 14 stations of the cross, which were made up by some 12th century monk. They don't really make a lot of sense. On the way to the crucifixion, he or she just made up when the cross falls at station 3 and when it's picked up at station 4 or whatever. So I wasn't telling that narrative, I was simply using that number of these smaller ones that were initially all made, they were made from a verb, scratching, sawing, dribbling, etc. And as time went on, I kept adding to this collection of these 20 by 20 inch ones, and there's now about 45 of them. There are 37 here. I've never seen them all in one place, but only 14 at a time. The smaller ones were a response to what was happening around me at the time. For instance, the opioid crisis is still going on, but it was in the press, I don't know when that was, 12 or 15 years ago. The Bosnian War led to those army men down there that are sequentially melted in the family stove, ouch. Or the mosquito netting that the Episcopal Church was all interested in to send very inexpensive things to countries where mosquitoes were just decimating the population. So they were a response through my hands via the cross to what was happening in my world. And so I kept doing it until 2 years ago when, alas, our church was closed. It's a long story, we won't go into that. So that is wall number 1. Now, yes?
Explain why this kind of cross.
As opposed to so this is the Greek cross, which is like a crossroads, as opposed to the Latin cross, asymmetrical, that you see with the bloody Christ hanging on it. I wanted something, a cross that was a cross, that's more neutral, that's broader culturally, and works with squares really well. And I've learned, I think, from maybe Georgianne Eubanks, who's here, that the Greek Orthodox Church saw that cross as a way of sending the truth of God out east, north, south, east, west, in a way that's somehow gentler than the Crusades, if you catch my meaning. So in 2019, my longtime partner with whom I started Clearscapes, which was a design firm in Raleigh, it became clear that he was very ill. And early that year, on maybe the first of the year, he and I shared with each other that he was going to depart. And I'm not sure who else he shared that with. His wife, Marianne, we're honored to have here. I don't know where she is, but she's here. There. As things declined, the heat of the summer came, and I felt once again the need to make something in order to make sense out of what was happening to me, to him. And I don't know why, but a Gothic arch came to mind. And you'll remember that in the Middle Ages, the cathedral builders, the reason for that was to kind of ooch up towards heaven, the great chain of being with God and the head angels and the lesser angels and the little cherubs going down, getting closer to earth. And the cathedrals were to kind of get closer until, alas, in the Amiens Cathedral, which fell down because it got too tall. And some say that's the beginning of the Renaissance and the end of the Middle Ages, which is an interesting thought. So this was an ooching up to try to get to the sacred, whatever that is. I had been making castings. This, by the way, all of this is concrete, cast on fabric and earth. I'll get to that in a minute. But I had been making castings of T-shirts and other clothing items. And a dear friend with whom I'll be performing in this space, Tiff Merritt, who's written 4 songs about these 4 walls, come in September. Tiff, I got to know her because she saw these T-shirts and said, I have something for you, and delivered to my front studio door a box of nightgowns, which had, I think, were made, but certainly worn in a once segregated mental hospital. And so they became the angels in this Gothic arch. Steve died in August, and I sort of left the piece alone. It didn't have this, and the center part was sort of arbitrary and not right. So this exhibition caused me nothing like a deadline to have to finish the piece. And I knew that Gothic arches have to be lofted off of columns, or they seem squat, which this one did in my studio, which is only 12 feet tall. And behold, a 20-foot wall approached where I could loft it. And in the remaking of this, I realized, so Reredos, this is called Reredos, which is the name of the wall behind an altar. And often those Reredoses are summoning the power of Mary and the beloved saint, whoever in that particular church would be, and the personages that church wanted to sort of summon behind the minister, all males, who would be in front of the altar, and then the congregation, the unwashed masses out there. And it was to bring the power of the church to speak to the people. As I said earlier, my sisters and I grew up on the grounds of Washington Cathedral, and our father was that minister in front of the reredos. And so I learned what this center part needed to be. This is a casting in the earth. This color comes from the earth itself, but this is concrete, this is not earth. And these are the stoles that my father wore, that were in a box that was kind of ratty. The sisters didn't want that box, so somehow it came to me, and my wife Jed remembered where it was. And so you can see the cathedral seal here and the fringe of the stoles. Stoles were originally worn by ministers with which to dry the feet of the congregation after washing those feet. So here is, and these these are all T-shirts, and the necks are all kind of facing you, but it's as if they were the congregation, but you guys are now the congregation. And these are T-shirts given to me by the Healing Place in Raleigh, which is an amazingly effective place for street addicts. They will take you stoned off the street and give you new clothes that night. And they, the Healing Place, have given me these T-shirts to use for this piece. I don't know if anybody from the Healing Place is here, but thank you for those T-shirts. This is a masonite with a laminate on it that I prepare, scratch it up, in essence, to receive the marks. And I spent, I don't know, a couple of months learning how to control as much as I wanted to. So these are all elongated puddles that were burning. And then in this case, I sort of sand them off and reveal the color of the burn on the white. It's complicated. I don't expect you to completely get it. But I then felt the need to have some kind of organizing narrative. And I don't know why, but I remembered reading Paradise Lost when I was 19 years old as an English major. And I started listening on my studio sound system to Paradise Lost. You'll recall that the story of the fall in the Bible is about a half a page long. And Milton wrote 420 pages in verse. And he made all of it up. And I felt the permission to use my marks to just make stuff up that made sense to me at the time. For instance, so it started out as a kind of comic book illustration of Paradise Lost, but I could see that was going to be a mile long. And so, but there's some connections. For instance, book 1, Satan and his cronies are hanging around in hell talking about the epic battle that they lost against God. God just whooped them, and there they are, and they're banished to hell, chained by their necks around a burning lake. How's that for an image? So these little weird squirt burning marks became this lake with the personages kind of hanging around. And the devil and his cronies built a city they called Pandemonium, a nice name. And as I was making this, I was thinking of the bombing of Dresden that I, for some reason, was reading about at the time. And George Floyd's death came about, and Black Lives Matter marching in our city of Raleigh and many others was occurring. And Jed and I were in some of those marches, but they went right under my studio window, so I saw the procession frequently to the gates of hell. etc. What it became, and it was unfinished, and my friend Steve Levitas saw it, one of the few, and said there's something unfinished about it, but nothing like a deadline. It was coming here, and I realized that for me, the meaning of all this was cool mark making, yes, but the central moment is the eating of the apple in the story, which set in motion when I was 19, same semester as reading Paradise Lost. I studied with William Peck at Chapel Hill, religion professor, who said to me, Thomas, the eating of the apple is really the first human act. It's a little bit blasphemous to some, perhaps, but, and I felt somehow vaguely the truth of that. So Adam and Eve in Paradise Lost, there's lots of discussion that goes on, including a talk about sex, human sex, and the angels say, well, you've seen nothing until you've had angel sex. And that literally is in this book, this long. So I then remembered why Paradise Lost stayed with me. And I'm groping for my glasses because the print is small. And I'm going to read to you the last 13 lines. Thank you, Jesse. No, I found them. I wept when I was 19, and I probably will again. So the scene is, after all these machinations, Adam and Eve have to leave. And the angel Michael leads them to the eastern gate and has a flaming sword so they can't get back into Eden. And here's how Milton ends his long piece. In either hand the hastening angel caught our lingering parents, and to the eastern gate led them direct, and down the cliff as fast to the subjugated plain, and then disappeared. They, Adam and Eve, looking back, all the eastern side beheld of paradise, so late their happy seat, waved over by that flaming brand, the gate with dreadful faces thronged in fiery arms. Some natural tears they dropped, but wiped them soon. The world was all before them, where to choose their place of rest, and providence their guide. They, hand in hand, with wandering steps and slow, through Eden took their solitary way. And what they faced was the hard-scrabble life of farming in a desert. And they had 2 sons, and one of them killed the other, and it set in motion what I believe to be the dance of being human, that we are, according to the cross, the crucified and the crucifiers, and we choose. And so this became this hard-scrabble southern landscape, which I find beautiful in our environment. So, wall number 3. I don't think we need to get up, but I do think afterwards, if I would invite you to walk behind this flag. There was a fourth wall, and I thought, I don't know quite why the idea of a flag came up, but I thought, well, I think we're all troubled by where our country is, and I have been for quite a while. I've made 2 flags before, much smaller, and not out of fabric. And I called my friend Mr. Victor Litvinenko, with whom I had been working doing clothing design. Victor invited me to his his Blue Jean studio and for a making night. There were dancers and a rapper and others. And I showed up with a welding torch and a bucket of dirt. And Victor invited me to the loading dock quickly. But there he was, and there we were, and we made some cloth together, and then within 3 days was a jacket that then 3 months later was on the runway in New York for Fashion Week. So it wasn't a big stretch to think, oh, I want to make a fabric flag. This wall is 20 by 30 feet. This flag is half the size of the Fort McHenry flag that flew over Fort McHenry. The British fleet with Francis Scott Key on one boat was about where the Francis Scott Key Bridge was, 2 miles or more away, and this gigantic 42 by 20 foot flag flew over, so this is half the size. So Victor and I went through a lot of iterations of how to make those marks. They are essentially made by welding over top of the fabric, which disseminates red hot BBs at 3,200 degrees Fahrenheit that start smoldering the cloth, which with fans makes that smolder grow until they're big enough, and then I put them out with sprayed water. I don't want to say too much about this because I think you need to experience it, but like the cross, like the reredos, like the sort of traditional meaning of the story of the fall, there's an ideal. And the ideal might be seen on the sheetrock wall. That, by the way, that painting of the flag is to federal specifications in size and color exactly. And so where is America? And what is America? It may be in between those two flags. I find it quite miraculous and unusual that all of you are here, this museum and all the effort it took to mount this, and my effort and the effort of my colleagues, all to make something that doesn't quite add up. This is just art. It's not healing any disease or curing homelessness. But we all are here, apparently, because we have faith in the meaning of this activity and things like it. And so the thanks goes to all of you for having that faith to be here and your attention and what you bring to this work. Thank you. This has been an unusual show, I tell you. Thank you. So I'm be delighted to hear what you have to say. If you have questions or whatever. I don't have any plans till late this afternoon, and I'm happy to talk to you guys as long as you want. Yes.
Well, I noticed that there are 14 panels here again. Was that
Really?
intentional, or did it just happen?
No. Was 14 intentional or not? No. But, or maybe, who knows?
Were you surprised?
Yes, I am surprised.
What exactly do you do?
What do I do? Well, I would say, Robert, that I make marks in various ways, and my job is to figure out how to make interesting marks that are useful. Any other? Yes.
I know the panel will fit over there, but could you talk about your self-portrait so that when people see it, they have a sense of it?
Oh, the self-portrait. So that was kind of a dare. Could I make a credible image of a person, in that case me, with nothing but smoke on a white surface? So that whole image, and Tyson's here. Tyson's good at Photoshop, so he and I were able to make, mostly he, black and white photographs of people, which is hard, so that they look like people, as opposed to blobs. So I then transferred that photograph by pencil and then put all this stuff, gravel and little washers and screws, like a resist, it's kind of like batik, on the surface. And then comes the stinky, nasty, sooty acetylene smoke from a welding torch, which descends on the horizontal surface. And wherever the little rocks and things are, it remains white. And if it's a round thing, the smoke kind of shades under the round thing. But then one has to get rid of all those little things which are on a very fragile surface. If you jiggle it, all those objects will erase the black, the soot. So my poor wife, Jed, hates the act of on a sled going like this in concert, throwing hard all those objects up into the air and getting the fragile black thing out of the way. We could demonstrate if you'd like. That was kind of a long answer, but what do? I work in very weird ways. That is a very weird thing to do. Other, way in the back.
Do you ever find yourself in dialogue with other artists of similar sensibilities, such as Ansel Kiefer or Dohosa?
Who was the second one?
Dohosa, he does work with little soldiers. And
Yeah. So am I in dialogue with other artists? Yes. We all have our fathers and mothers. There's a lot of artists who affect me, and those two are a good example. I was recently in Marfa, Texas, for the second time, where I encountered Donald Judd, who 10 years ago I could have taken or left. But 4 days in Marfa, Texas, with nothing else going on, engaging the breadth, the amount of work that he has there, he's no longer with us, I came to realize how profound Donald Judd's work is. So I'm still getting influenced all the time by artists and other things, and it all becomes part of the work somehow. Yes?
You've described often kind of your artistic approach, but it's very, very physical, and you discuss the violent aspect of it and so forth. Of all of these physical techniques you use, is there one that speaks like to your body, to your person? Is there one that you're drawn to in kind of a unique or special way?
Lots of different techniques: burning, scraping, digging. Which one resonates with my person? Well, they all do, or I wouldn't do them. Okay. Some are more, earth casting, digging big molds in the ground and casting concrete into those molds and picking them up with other people. I can't do earth casting by myself, and it's harder for me to get in and out of the damn hole. I still go there, but I have young colleagues and even a daughter that will get in that hole and dig. There's something very resonant for my soul in that act. I don't really like the little dropping of gravel inside the lines for the self-portrait. I love it when we haven't jiggled it and all the stuff goes up and there it is and oh, it worked. That's great. So some are more or less tedious than others. Some are more dangerous than others. Some involve lots of people, which is a mixed bag, but increasingly I like that. So, yeah. Yes.
I am both a pastor's child and an artist who also creates work to wrestle with the impacts of such an upbringing. And so I deeply appreciate this series. Thank you so much for bringing it to life. And I'm very curious about the influence of your journey with that upbringing, both on your adult self and on your creative life. Because my experience of this series is a wrestling in some ways with that upbringing and creating a religious life for you that is your own. And I'd love to hear you talk more about the impact of your upbringing, both on your creative work and on you as a person.
I want to hear what you have to say. That was very well said. Wow. Well, yeah, I mean, we're all wrestling with who we are, or ignoring, or putting our head in the sand. But yeah, it's working. One of the things I'm very grateful about this show and just where I am in life is I'm willing to be more out there with it all. I don't really care about what people think. So yeah, and the opportunity to do this and finish these two pieces that were done very intuitively and just, during pandemic, there were no clients and money, or it wasn't a career thing. It was sequestration. Is that the right word? And so I made this, and I made that because I needed to do something to balance all the pain that was around me and my world. So I yearned to, and I have to, he's not here, but Zach Weinberg, who worked in my studio for a while, he knew that, and he said, I'll get up early, and he was not a morning person. I'll get up early before it gets too hot and help you make that. What a gift. And it allowed me to get through it all. And I didn't know what it was about, and finishing it, I then, now 2 years, 3 years later, now it makes a kind of holistic sense to me. Yes?
When you start a piece, do you start with a mark or an ideal?
What a great question. Do I start with a mark or an ideal? Both. So there is no art without a mark, and I'm good at inventing marks that are potent and interesting and unusual. But I have a need to tell stories and to. I'm a preacher's kid. I use words, and so there has to be some alignment. Just marks for marks are not enough for me. But the ideas, the concepts which are not marks, can get in the way too. You can follow an idea and kill the piece because you've left the marks out. Does that make sense? Good. That was a tough question. Okay, Robert.
The beauty of art is we could talk all day and all night.
Well, but beware of what artists say about their work, because that's a different language, which goes to your point.
My question is,
Okay.
if we wanted to spread the word about this show and what it was about, and I don't like this term, but what's a good elevator speech that you would give to describe this show?
Oh, wow. What? The question was, what would be the elevator speech for this show? That's for others to invent. My job is to do the work. Yes, ma'am.
How did you get started with all this media, this way that you go about your
How did I get started? Would a corollary question be, why don't I shop at the art store? I mean, I'm trying to get at your question.
No. When you first started doing this kind of work, what led you to
But what kind of work are you referring to?
all this different media?
Okay. Well, I've always been timid around, real artists that can paint and make things look like, it looks in the real world. And I've never had that facility, but I needed to make things. And so I've made things in different ways. The physical, I feel more satisfied at the end of the day when I've done a good day's work, kind of like working at the factory. I feel I can sleep better when I've used my body to work. So it's kind of a proletariat sense of what a day's work is. And I've always related to that. So that has something to do with all these materials. They just speak to me. And I use the brain that lives in the hands. And it's back to your point of the balance. So one could say that mark making is from the hands, from the body, and the ideas are from your brain, perhaps. And the heart is in there too. I've always relied on my hands to know what to do. An example is these two panels I added, as I think I said, to all these others, because it was unfinished without these. But to remember how to make this right here, to hook up convincingly with this that was made 2 years before, it was really hard. And I thought I wasn't going to get there. And I was despairing, what would I do? But it finally came. And it wasn't by thinking about it, it was by making messes and throwing stuff away, unfortunately. Yes?
You've taken these techniques that have some basis in everyday trades and put your own spin on them.
Uh-huh.
Is there one that you're working on now that you can't quite get?
There was one word I didn't get. I'm using everyday...
Trades, like welding.
Oh, trades.
Slag from welding, form concrete.
Well, I'm not very good at Photoshop. Right? I just don't have the patience to sit down because it's sitting down, and I need to move around and lift stuff, and I need the resistance of, welding has its own grain. I mean, it does what it does, and it doesn't do a lot of other things. And wood and concrete they're all alive to me and unique and individual. So I just engage with those trades, and they're simple and humble trades, kind of like the people who built the cathedral. They were, the real heroes were the masons and the carvers and the carvers of various things. Yes?
The cross, what I'm calling the cross panel up here.
Yeah?
I heard you talk about other time, and it's the cover of the book. So say more about that panel, please.
Well, I saw this as Michael's sword, flaming. This was actually made a little differently in that this was the same black smoke that rained down on the self-portrait, right, from a welding torch, which I then flogged with rope, and just, like a cat of nine tails, to make those marks. So it's very fragile until it's sealed, and now it's a strong surface.
Thomas, a lot of people here aren't tell them about fiberglass and marbles and glass and steel?
Well, there's a lot of processes here. I mean, yeah, I work in different stuff. I have had the pleasure of working with 1.4 million shooter marbles one time, which is a semi-truck and a half of marbles. Give me a lot of anything, and I can make art out of it eventually. But you got to have a lot of them to get the power of repetition and variation of the theme. Those marbles are not that round, and nor are they the same color. Because they're made by hand pretty much in West Virginia at Marble King. And when you put 1.4 million of them together, the variations you see and feel, and it becomes alive. Other questions? So September, maybe, I don't know when, I have no idea what time it is. I'll talk forever. Keep going?
I was not keeping track of time either. I was just...
Great. What other comments do we have? Yes?
Where can we see other pieces of your work besides the outdoors at the North Carolina Museum?
Well, Portland, Oregon, Denver, Thailand, Calgary, Canada. I mean, there's a lot.
How about North Carolina?
In North Carolina, well, Raleigh, there's several. Kinston, oh, thank you, yeah. Kinston, there's a very improbable piece, a block long in downtown Kinston. It's a very cool, I'm sorry?
It's outside.
It is. Yeah, I'm talking about outside things, yeah. Greensboro, yeah, let's keep it going here. Lenore? I don't remember. Lenore, yeah, great piece there. All of them have stories. Charlotte, yes. Where?
Outside of Stanton, Virginia.
Stanton, Virginia. These guys really know. Right here. So if you go to WUNC TV, you can still instantly, last time I tried, get a 56-minute film called Earthcaster. And it's all about the big pieces that come out of the ground. This is Donna Campbell and Georgianne Eubanks right here who made that film. We spent 3 years, not continuously, but they got in the hole. They have hard hats and boots, and thank you for being here. Other questions? So did that give you something to go on? Okay, good. Other comments? Way in the back, and then Hattie.
Bullet holes in the cross. Did you shoot the cross?
I did. I did, and my brother-in-law is here, and he knows I have a phobia about guns. But I have friends who have guns, and I did a number of pieces about that. We're looking, so mark making, one way to make marks is to shoot fairly potent projectiles through various materials. In that case, that's 16 gauge steel, and it's triple-aught shot, the size of my fingernail, which is pretty lethal. And about 5 of them or so come out with one shell. So I did shoot that myself. More preferable when I was shooting stuff up was the youngins, friends of mine that owned the guns. I preferred them to be the shooters and me more like cameraman, director, to sort of say what I was looking for, because I found the act of shooting overwhelming. It was just so powerful, I couldn't make aesthetic decisions. And I've shot machine guns and all kinds of stuff that people have. Pardon me?
Is that at close range? Very close?
About from here to that wall. Yeah, and then Hadley, you had
Just talk about the sunflower for Dick's Park.
the sunflower. So I would say that these pieces are more like free verse. There aren't any rules about iambic, the pattern or rhyme scheme. It's pretty free. I am producing, as we speak, 2 80-foot-high sunflowers through which Duke Energy high-tension lines will be strung. I would say that is more like a sonnet. There's all kinds of rules. So the creative running room is more compressed. I'm not sure it's less creative, but it's a very different way of working. Picture me and 7, count them, 7 Duke engineers, all there to say no. But they've come around, and this piece will be built and erected in September. Along in Raleigh, good question. Along the edge of Dick's Park, which is this enormous park that's a 100-year project for that city to build it out. So these will form the entrance to the first big build-out, which is a $10 million family park place that's one of 2 in the world. Yeah. So these form the entrance, in a way. Yeah. Thank you for everything. Make me cry.